The Winter Olympic Games is a major international sporting event that occurs once every 4 years. Unlike the Summer Olympics, the Winter Olympics feature sports practiced on snow and ice. The first Winter Olympics, the 1924 Winter Olympics, was held in Chamonix, France. The original 5 sports were bobsleigh, curling, ice hockey, Nordic skiing, and skating. The Games were held every 4 years from 1924 until 1936, after which they were interrupted by World War II. The Olympics resumed in 1948 and was again held every 4 years. Until 1992, the Winter and Summer Olympic Games were held in the same years, but in accordance with a 1986 decision by the International Olympic Committee to place the Summer and Winter Games on separate 4-year cycles in alternating even-numbered years, your next Winter Olympics after 1992 was in 1994. The Winter Games has evolved since its inception. Sports and disciplines have been added and some of them, such as alpine skiing, luge, short-track speed skating, freestyle skiing, skeleton, and snowboarding, have earned a permanent spot on the Olympic program. Others have been discontinued and later reintroduced, or have been permanently discontinued. Still others, such as speed skiing, bandy and skiddering, were demonstration sports but never incorporated as Olympic sports. The rise of television as a global medium for communication enhanced the profile of the Games. It created an income stream, via the sale of broadcast rights and advertising, which has become lucrative for the IOC. This allowed outside interests, such as television companies and corporate sponsors, to exert influence. The IOC has had to address several criticisms, internal scandals, the use of performance-enhancing drugs by Winter Olympians, as well as a political boycott of the Winter Olympics. Nations have used the Winter Games to showcase the claimed superiority of their political systems. The Winter Olympics has been hosted on 3 continents by 11 different countries. The United States has hosted the Games 4 times. France has been the host 3 times. Austria, Canada, Japan, Italy, Norway, and Switzerland have hosted the Games twice. Germany, Yugoslavia, and Russia have hosted the Games once. The IOC has selected Pyeongchang, South Korea, to host the 2018 Winter Olympics. No country in the Southern Hemisphere has hosted or even been an applicant to host the Winter Olympics. The major challenge preventing one hosting the Games is the dependence on winter weather, and the traditional February timing of the Games falls in the middle of the Southern Hemisphere summer. 12 countries are Austria, Canada, Finland, France, Great Britain, Hungary, Italy, Norway, Poland, Sweden, Switzerland and the United States have sent athletes to every Winter Olympic Games. 6 of those are Austria, Canada, Finland, Norway, Sweden and the United States have earned medals at every Winter Olympic Games, and only 1 the United States has earned gold at each Games. Germany and Japan have been banned at times from competing in the Games. History, early years. A predecessor, the Nordic Games, were organized by General Victor Gustav Balck in 1901 and were held again in 1903 and 1905 and then every 4th year thereafter until 1926. Balck was a charter member of the International Olympic Committee and a close friend of Olympic Games founder Pierre de Coubertin. He attempted to have winter sports, specifically figure skating, added to the Olympic program but was unsuccessful until the 1908 Summer Olympics in London, United Kingdom. 4 figure skating events were contested, at which Ulrich Salchow and Madge Jeux won the individual titles. 3 years later, Italian County Eugenio Brunetta Dusso proposed that the IOC stage a week of winter sports included as part of the 1912 Summer Olympics in Stockholm, Sweden. The organizers opposed this idea because they desired to protect the integrity of the Nordic Games and were concerned about a lack of facilities for winter sports. The idea was resurrected for the 1916 Games, which were to be held in Berlin, Germany. A winter sports week with speed skating, figure skating, ice hockey and Nordic skiing was planned, but the 1916 Olympics was cancelled after the outbreak of World War I. The first Olympics after the war, The 1920 Summer Olympics were held in Antwerp, Belgium, and featured figure skating and an ice hockey tournament. Germany, Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria and Turkey were banned from competing in the Games. At the IOC Congress held the following year, it was decided that the host nation of the 1924 Summer Olympics, France, would host a separate international winter sports week under the patronage of the IOC. Chamonix was chosen to host this week of events. The Games proved to be a success when more than 250 athletes from 16 nations competed in 16 events. Athletes from Finland and Norway won 28 medals, more than the rest of the participating nations combined. Germany remained banned until 1925, and instead hosted a series of games called Deutsche Kampfspiel, starting with the winter edition of 1922. In 1925 the IOC decided to create a separate Olympic Winter Games, and the 1924 Games in Chamonix was retroactively designated as the first Winter Olympics. St. Moritz, Switzerland, was appointed by the IOC to host the second Olympic Winter Games in 1928. Fluctuating weather conditions challenged the hosts. The opening ceremony was held in a blizzard while warm weather conditions plagued sporting events throughout the rest of the Games. Because of the weather, the 10,000-meter speed skating event had to be abandoned and officially cancelled. The weather was not the only noteworthy aspect of the 1928 Games. Sonja Henie of Norway made history when she won the figure skating competition at the age of 15. She became the youngest Olympic champion in history, a distinction she would hold for 74 years. Your next Winter Olympics was the first to be hosted outside of Europe. 17 nations and 252 athletes participated. This was less than in 1928, as the journey to Lake Placid, United States, was a long and expensive one for most competitors who had little money in the midst of the Great Depression. The athletes competed in 14 events in 4 sports. Virtually no snow fell for 2 months before the Games, and it was not until mid-January that there was enough snow to hold all the events. Sonja Henie defended her Olympic title, and Eddie Egan, who had been an Olympic champion in boxing in 1920, won the gold in the men's bobsleigh event to become the first, and so far only, Olympian to have won gold medals in both the Summer and Winter Olympics. The German towns of Garmisch and Partenkirchen joined to organize the 1936 edition of the Winter Games, held on February 16. This would be the last time the Summer and Winter Olympics were held in the same country in the same year. Alpine skiing made its Olympic debut, but skiing teachers were barred from entering because they were considered to be professionals. Because of this decision, the Swiss and Austrian skiers refused to compete at the Games. World War II interrupted the celebrations of the Winter Olympics. The 1940 Games had been awarded to Sapporo, Japan, but the decision was rescinded in 1938 because of the Japanese invasion of China. The Games were moved to Garmisch-Partenkirchen, Germany, but the German invasion of Poland in 1939 forced the complete cancellation of the 1940 Games. Due to the ongoing war, the 1944 Games, originally scheduled for Cortina d'Ampezzo, Italy, were cancelled. 1948 to 1960. St. Moritz was selected to host the first post-war Games in 1948. Switzerland's neutrality had protected the town during World War II, and most of the venues were in place from the 1928 Games, which made St. Moritz a logical choice to become the first city to host a Winter Olympics twice. 28 countries competed in Switzerland, but athletes from Germany and Japan were not invited. Controversy erupted when 2 hockey teams from the United States arrived, both claiming to be the legitimate U.S. Olympic hockey representative. The Olympic flag presented at the 1920 Summer Olympics in Antwerp was stolen, as was its replacement. There was unprecedented parity at these Games, during which 10 countries won gold medals, more than any Games to that point. The Olympic flame for the 1952 Games in Oslo was lit in the fireplace by skiing pioneer Sonja Nordheim, and the torch relay was conducted by 94 participants entirely on skis. Bandy, a popular sport in the Nordic countries, was featured as a demonstration sport, though only Norway, Sweden and Finland fielded teams. Norwegian athletes won 17 medals, which outpaced all the other nations. They were led by Hjalmar Andersson, who won 3 gold medals in 4 events in the speed skating competition. After not being able to host the Games in 1944, Cortina d'Ampezzo was selected to organize the 1956 Winter Olympics. At the opening ceremonies, the final torchbearer, Guido Caroli, entered the Olympic Stadium on ice skates. As he skated around the stadium, his skate caught on a cable and he fell, nearly extinguishing the flame. He was able to recover and light the cauldron. These were the first Winter Games to be televised, though no television rights would be sold until the 1960 Summer Olympics in Rome. The Cortina Games were used to test the feasibility of televising large sporting events. The Soviet Union made its Olympic debut and had an immediate impact, winning more medals than any other nation. Shiharu Iga won the first Winter Olympics medal for Japan and the continent of Asia, when he placed second in the slalom. The IOC awarded the 1960 Olympics to Squaw Valley, United States. Since the village was underdeveloped, there was a rush to construct infrastructure and sports facilities like an ice arena, speed skating track, and a ski jump hill. The opening and closing ceremonies were produced by Walt Disney. The Squaw Valley Olympics had a number of notable firsts. It was the first Olympics to have a dedicated athletes' village, it was the first to use a computer to tabulate results, and the first to feature female speed skating events. The bobsleigh events were absent for the only time, because the organizing committee found it too expensive to build the bobsleigh run. 1964 to 1980. The Austrian city of Innsbruck was the host in 1964. Although Innsbruck was a traditional winter sports resort, warm weather caused a lack of snow during the Games and the Austrian army was asked to transport snow and ice to the sport venues. Soviet speed skater Lydia Skoblikova made history by sweeping all 4 speed skating events. Her career total of 6 gold medals set a record for Winter Olympics athletes. Luge was first contested in 1964, although the sport received bad publicity when a competitor was killed in a pre-Olympic training run. Held in the French town of Grenoble, the 1968 Winter Olympics were the first Olympic Games to be broadcast in color. There were 37 nations and 1,158 athletes competing in 35 events. Frenchman Jean-Claude Killy became only the second person to win all the men's alpine skiing events. The organizing committee sold television rights for $2 a million, which was more than double the price of the broadcast rights for the Innsbruck Games. Venues were spread over long distances requiring 3 athletes' villages. The organizers claimed this was required to accommodate technological advances. Critics disputed this, alleging that the layout was necessary to provide the best possible venues for television broadcasts at the expense of the athletes. The 1972 Winter Games, held in Sapporo, Japan, were the first to be hosted outside North America or Europe. The issue of professionalism became contentious during the Sapporo Games. 3 days before the Games, IOC President Avery Brundage threatened to bar a number of alpine skiers from competing because they participated in a ski camp at Mammoth Mountain in the United States. Brundage reasoned that the skiers had financially benefited from their status as athletes and were therefore no longer amateurs. Eventually only Austrian Karl Schranz, who earned more than all the other skiers, was not allowed to compete. Canada did not send teams to the 1972 or 1976 ice hockey tournaments in protest of their inability to use players from professional leagues. Francisco Fernández Ochoa became the first Spaniard to win a Winter Olympic gold medal. He triumphed in the slalom. The 1976 Winter Olympics had been awarded in 1970 to Denver, United States, but in November 1972 the voters of the state of Colorado voted against public funding of the Games by a 3-2 margin. The IOC turned to offer the Games to Vancouver Garibaldi, British Columbia, which had been a candidate for the 1976 Games. However, a change in provincial government brought in an administration which did not support the Olympic bid, so the offer was rejected. Salt Lake City, a candidate for the 1972 Games, offered itself, but the IOC opted to ask Innsbruck, which had maintained most of the infrastructure from the 1964 Games. With half the time to prepare for the Games as intended, Innsbruck accepted the invitation to replace Denver in February 1973. Two Olympic flames were lit because it was the second time the Austrian town had hosted the Games. The 1976 Games featured the first combination bobsleigh and luge track, in neighboring Igls. The Soviet Union won its fourth consecutive ice hockey gold medal. In 1980 the Olympics returned to Lake Placid, which had hosted the 1932 Games. The first boycott of a Winter Olympics occurred in 1980 when Taiwan refused to participate after an edict by the IOC mandated that they change their name and national anthem. The IOC was attempting to accommodate China, who wished to compete using the same name and anthem that had been used by Taiwan. American speed skater Eric Heiden set either an Olympic or world record in each of the 5 events he competed in. Hanne Wenzel won both the slalom and giant slalom, and her country, Liechtenstein, became the smallest nation to produce an Olympic gold medalist. In the Miracle on Ice the American hockey team beat the favored Soviets, and then went on to win the gold medal. 1984 to 1998. Sapporo, Japan and Gothenburg, Sweden, were front-runners to host the 1984 Winter Olympics. It was therefore a surprise when Sarajevo, Yugoslavia, was selected as host. The Games were well organized and displayed no indication of the war that would engulf the country 8 years later. A total of 49 nations and 1,272 athletes participated in 39 events. Host nation Yugoslavia won its first Olympic medal when alpine skier Juri Franco won a silver in the giant slalom. Another sporting highlight was the free dance performance of British ice dancers Jane Torville and Christopher Dean. Their performance to Ravel's Bowler copyright earned the pair the gold medal after achieving unanimous perfect scores for artistic impression. In 1988, the Canadian city of Calgary hosted the first Winter Olympics to span 16 days. New events were added in ski jumping and speed skating. While future Olympic sports curling, short track speed skating and freestyle skiing made their appearance as demonstration sports. For the first time the speed skating events were held indoors, on the Olympic Oval. Dutch skater Yvonne van Gennep won 3 gold medals and set 2 world records, beating skaters from the favored East German team in every race. Her medal total was equaled by Finnish ski jumper Matti Nikkanen, who won all 3 events in his sport. Alberto Tomba, an Italian skier, made his Olympic debut by winning both the giant slalom and slalom. East German Christa Rothenberger won the women's 1,000-meter speed skating event. 7 months later she would earn a silver in track cycling at the Summer Games in Seoul, to become the only athlete to win medals in both the Summer and Winter Olympics in the same year. The 1992 Games were the last to be held in the same year as the Summer Games. They were hosted in the French Savoy region in the city of Albertville, though only 18 events were held in the city. The rest of the events were spread out over the Savoy. Political changes of the time were reflected in the Olympic teams appearing in France. This was the first Games to be held after the fall of communism and the dismantling of the Berlin Wall, and Germany competed as a single nation for the first time since the 1964 Games. Former Yugoslavian republics Croatia and Slovenia made their debuts as independent nations. Most of the former Soviet republics still competed as a single team known as the Unified Team, but the Baltic states made independent appearances for the first time since before World War II. At 16 years old, Finnish ski jumper Toni Niemann made history by becoming the youngest male Winter Olympic champion. New Zealand skier Annalise Kobga became the first Winter Olympic medalist from the Southern Hemisphere when she won a silver medal in the women's slalom. In 1986 the IOC had voted to separate the Summer and Winter Games and place them in alternating even-numbered years. This change became effective for the 1994 Games, held in Lillehammer, Norway, which became the first Winter Olympics to be held separate from the Summer Games. After the division of Czechoslovakia in 1993 the Czech Republic and Slovakia made their Olympic debuts. The women's figure skating competition garnered media attention when American skater Nancy Kerrigan was injured on January 6, 1994, in an assault planned by the ex-husband of opponent Tonya Harding. Both skaters competed in the Games, but the gold medal was won by Oksana Bayul. She became Ukraine's first Olympic champion. Johan Olaf of Norway won 3 gold medals, coming first in all of the distance speed skating events. The 1998 Winter Olympics were held in the Japanese city of Nagano and were the first games to host more than 2,000 athletes. The men's ice hockey tournament was open to professionals for the first time. Canada and the United States, with their many NHL players, were favored to win the tournament. Neither won any hockey medals, however, as the Czech Republic prevailed. Women's ice hockey made its debut and the United States won the gold medal. Jarl Dali of Norway won 3 gold medals in Nordic skiing. He became the most decorated Winter Olympic athlete with 8 gold medals and 12 medals overall. Austrian Hermann Maier survived a crash during the downhill competition and returned to win gold in the Super G and the giant slalom. A wave of new world records were set in speed skating because of the introduction of the clap skate. 2002 to 2010. The 2002 Winter Olympics were held in Salt Lake City, United States, hosting 77 nations and 2,399 athletes in 78 events in 7 sports. These games were the first to take place since September 11, 2001, which meant a higher degree of security to avoid a terrorist attack. The opening ceremonies of the Games saw signs of the aftermath of the events of that day, including the flag that flew at Ground Zero, NYPD officer Daniel Rodriguez singing God Bless America, and honor guards of NYPD and FDNY members. German Georg Hackl won a silver in the singles luge, becoming the first athlete in Olympic history to win medals in the same individual event in 5 consecutive Olympics. Canada achieved an unprecedented double by winning both the men's and women's ice hockey gold medals. Canada became embroiled with Russia in a controversy that involved the judging of the pair's figure skating competition. The Russian pair of Yelena Berzhina and Anton Tsikharelets competed against the Canadian pair of Jamie Sala-Copyright and David Pelletier for the gold medal. The Canadians appeared to have skated well enough to win the competition, yet the Russians were awarded the gold. The judging broke along Cold War lines, with judges from former communist countries favoring the Russian pair and judges from Western nations voting for the Canadians. The only exception was the French judge, Marie-Reine Legaun, who awarded the gold to the Russians. An investigation revealed that she had been pressured to give the gold to the Russian pair regardless of how they skated. In return, the Russian judge would look favorably on the French entrants in the ice dancing competition. The IOC decided to award both pairs the gold medal in a second medal ceremony held later in the Games. Australian Stephen Bradbury became the first gold medalist from the Southern Hemisphere when he won the 1,000-metre short track speed skating event. The Italian city of Turin hosted the 2006 Winter Olympics. It was the second time that Italy had hosted the Winter Olympic Games. South Korean athletes won 10 medals, including 6 gold in the short track speed skating events. Sun Yoo-jin won 3 gold medals while her teammate Yeon Soo-won won 3 gold medals and a bronze. In the women's cross-country team pursuit, Canadian Sarah Renner broke one of her poles and, when he saw her dilemma, Norwegian coach Bjarne Harjen Kensmoen decided to lend her a pole. In so doing, she was able to help her team win a silver medal in the event at the expense of the Norwegian team, who finished 4th. Claudia Pechstein of Germany became the first speed skater to earn 9 career medals. In February 2009, Pechstein tested positive for blood manipulation, and received a 2-year suspension, which she appealed. The Court of Arbitration for Sport upheld her suspension, but a Swiss court ruled that she could compete for a spot on the 2010 German Olympic team. This ruling was brought to the Swiss Federal Tribunal, which overturned the lower court's ruling and precluded her from competing in Vancouver. In 2003, the IOC awarded the 2010 Winter Olympics to Vancouver, thus allowing Canada to host its second Winter Olympics. With a population of more than 2.5 million people, Vancouver is the largest metropolitan area to ever host a Winter Olympic Games. Over 2,500 athletes from 82 countries participated in 86 events. The death of Georgian luger Nordic Umratashvili in a training run on the day of the opening ceremonies cast a pall over the Games. His death forced officials at the Whistler Sliding Centre to change the track to make it safer. Norwegian cross-country skier Marit Bjergen won 5 medals in the 6 cross-country events on the women's program. She finished the Olympics with 3 golds, a silver and a bronze. The Vancouver Games were notable for the poor performance of the Russian athletes. From their first Winter Olympics in 1956 to the 2006 Games, a Soviet or Russian delegation had never been outside the top 5 medal-winning nations. In 2010 they finished 6th in total medals and 11th in gold medals. President Dmitry Medvedev called for the resignation of top sports officials immediately after the Games. The success of Asian countries stood in stark contrast to the underperforming Russian team, with Vancouver marking a high point for medals won by Asian countries. In 1992 the Asian countries had won 15 medals, 3 of which were gold. In Vancouver the total number of medals won by athletes from Asia had increased to 31, with 11 of them being gold. The rise of Asian nations in Winter Olympics sports is due in part to the growth of winter sports programs and the interest in winter sports in nations such as South Korea, Japan and China. 2014, Sochi, Russia, was selected as the host city of the 2014 Winter Olympics over Salzburg, Austria, and Pyeongchang, South Korea. This was the first time since the breakup of the Soviet Union that Russia hosted a Winter Olympics. Over 2,800 athletes from 88 countries participated in 98 events. The Olympic Village and Olympic Stadium are located on the Black Sea coast. All of the mountain venues are 50 kilometers away in the alpine region known as Krasnaya Polyana. The 2014 Winter Olympics, officially the XXII Olympic Winter Games, or the 22nd Winter Olympics, took place from 7 to February 23, 2014. Future. On July 6, 2011, the IOC selected the city of Pyeongchang, South Korea to host the 2018 Winter Olympics. The host city for the XXIV Olympic Winter Games, also known as the 2022 Winter Olympics, will be elected on July 31, 2015, at the 127th IOC session in Kuala Lumpur. Controversy. The process for awarding host city honors came under intense scrutiny after Salt Lake City had been awarded the right to host the 2002 Games. Soon after the host city had been announced, it was discovered that the organizers had engaged in an elaborate bribery scheme to curry favor with IOC officials. Gifts and other financial considerations were given to those who would evaluate and vote on Salt Lake City's bid. These gifts included medical treatment for relatives, a college scholarship for one member's son and a land deal in Utah. Even IOC President Juan Antonio Samaranch received 2 rifles valued at $2,000. Samaranch defended the gift as inconsequential since, as president, he was a non-voting member. The subsequent investigation uncovered inconsistencies in the bids for every Games since 1988. For example, the gifts received by IOC members from the Japanese Organizing Committee for Nagano's bid for the 1998 Winter Olympics were described by the investigation committee as astronomical. Although nothing strictly illegal had been done, the IOC feared that corporate sponsors would lose faith in the integrity of the process and that the Olympic brand would be tarnished to such an extent that advertisers would begin to pull their support. The investigation resulted in the expulsion of 10 IOC members and the sanctioning of another 10. New terms and age limits were established for IOC membership, and 15 former Olympic athletes were added to the committee. Stricter rules for future bids were imposed, with ceilings imposed on the value of gifts IOC members could accept from bid cities. Host city legacy. According to the IOC, the host city is responsible for establishing functions and services for all aspects of the Games, such as sports planning, venues, finance, technology, accommodation, catering, media services etc., as well as operations during the Games. Due to the cost of hosting an Olympic Games, most host cities never realize a profit on their investment. For example, the 1998 Winter Olympics in Nagano, Japan, cost $12.5 billion. By comparison, the Torino Games of 2006 cost $3.6 billion to host. The organizers claim that the cost of extending the bullet train service from Tokyo to Nagano was responsible for the large price tag. The organizing committee hoped that the exposure of the Olympic Games, and the expedited access to Nagano from Tokyo, would be a boon to the local economy for years afterward. Nagano's economy did experience a 2-year post-Olympic spurt, but the long-term effects have not materialized as planned. The possibility of heavy debt, coupled with unused sports venues and infrastructure that saddle the local community with upkeep costs and no practical post-Olympic value, is a deterrent to prospective host cities. To mitigate these concerns, the IOC has enacted several initiatives. First, it has agreed to fund part of the host city's budget for staging the Games. Secondly, the IOC limits the qualifying host countries to those that have the resources and infrastructure to successfully host an Olympic Games without negatively impacting the region or nation. This eliminates a large portion of the developing world. Finally, cities bidding to host the Games are required to add a legacy plan to their proposal. This requires prospective host cities and the IOC to plan with a view to the long-term economic and environmental impact that hosting the Olympics will have on the region. Doping. In 1967, the IOC began enacting drug testing protocols. They started by randomly testing athletes at the 1968 Winter Olympics. The first Winter Games athlete to test positive for a banned substance was Louis Schloeder, a West German hockey player, but his team was still allowed to compete. During the 1970s, testing outside of competition was escalated because it was found to deter athletes from using performance-enhancing drugs. The problem with testing during this time was a lack of standardization of the test procedures, which undermined the credibility of the tests. It was not until the late 1980s that international sporting federations began to coordinate efforts to standardize the drug testing protocols. The IOC took the lead in the fight against steroids when it established the Independent World Anti-Doping Agency in November 1999. The 2006 Winter Olympics in Turin became notable for a scandal involving the emerging trend of blood doping, the use of blood transfusions or synthetic hormones such as erythropoietin to improve oxygen flow and thus reduce fatigue. The Italian police conducted a raid on the Austrian cross-country ski team's residence during the Games where they seized blood doping specimens and equipment. This event followed the pre-Olympic suspension of 12 cross-country skiers who tested positive for unusually high levels of hemoglobin, which is evidence of blood doping. Commercialization. Avery Brundage, as president of the IOC from 1952 to 1972, rejected all attempts to link the Olympics with commercial interests as he felt that the Olympic movement should be completely separate from financial influence. The 1960 Winter Olympics marked the beginning of corporate sponsorship of the Games. Despite Brundage's strenuous resistance, the commercialization of the Games continued during the 1960s, and revenue generated by corporate sponsorship swelled the IOC's coffers. By the Grenoble Games, Brundage had become so concerned about the direction of the Winter Olympic Games towards commercialization that, if it could not be corrected, he felt the Winter Olympics should be abolished. Brundage's resistance to this revenue stream meant that the IOC was unable to gain a share of the financial windfall that was coming to host cities, and had no control over the structuring of sponsorship deals. When Brundage retired, the IOC had $2 million in assets. 8 years later its accounts had swelled to $45 million. This was due to a shift in ideology among IOC members, towards expansion of the Games through corporate sponsorship and the sale of television rights. Brundage's concerns proved prophetic. The IOC has charged more for television broadcast rights at each successive Games. At the 1998 Nagano Games, American broadcaster CBS paid $375 million, whereas the 2006 Turin Games cost NBC $613 million to broadcast. The more television companies have paid to televise the Games, the greater their persuasive power has been with the IOC. For example, the television lobby has influenced the Olympic program by dictating when event finals are held, so that they appear in prime time for television audiences. they have pressured the IOC to include new events, such as snowboarding, that appeal to broader television audiences. This has been done to boost ratings, which were slowly declining until the 2010 Games. In 1986 the IOC decided to stagger the Summer and Winter Games. Instead of holding both in the same calendar year, the committee decided to alternate them every 2 years, although both games would still be held on 4-year cycles. It was decided that 1992 would be the last year to have both a Winter and Summer Olympic Games. There were 2 underlying reasons for this change. First was the television lobby's desire to maximize advertising revenue, as it was difficult to sell advertising time for 2 games in the same year. Second was the IOC's desire to gain more control over the revenue generated by the games. It was decided that staggering the games would make it easier for corporations to sponsor individual Olympic Games, which would maximize revenue potential. The IOC sought to directly negotiate sponsorship contracts so that they had more control over the Olympic brand. The first Winter Olympics to be hosted in this new format were the 1994 Games in Lillehammer. Politics, Cold War. The Winter Olympics have been an ideological front in the Cold War since the Soviet Union first participated at the 1956 Winter Games. It did not take long for the Cold War combatants to discover what a powerful propaganda tool the Olympic Games could be. Soviet and American politicians used the Olympics as an opportunity to prove the perceived superiority of their respective political systems. The successful Soviet athlete was feted and honored. Irina Rodnina, 3-time Olympic gold medalist in figure skating, was awarded the Order of Lenin after her victory at the 1976 Winter Olympics in Innsbruck. Soviet athletes who won gold medals could expect to receive between $4,000 and $8,000 depending on the prestige of the sport. A world record was worth an additional $1,500. In 1978 the United States Congress responded to these measures by passing legislation that reorganized the United States Olympic Committee. It also approved financial rewards to medal-winning athletes. The Cold War created tensions amongst countries allied to the 2 superpowers. The strained relationship between East and West Germany created a difficult political situation for the IOC. Because of its role in World War II, Germany was not allowed to compete at the 1948 Winter Olympics. In 1950 the IOC recognized the West German Olympic Committee, and invited East and West Germany to compete as a unified team at the 1952 Winter Games. East Germany declined the invitation and instead sought international legitimacy separate from West Germany. In 1955 the Soviet Union recognized East Germany as a sovereign state, thereby giving more credibility to East Germany's campaign to become an independent participant at the Olympics. The IOC agreed to provisionally accept the East German National Olympic Committee with the condition that East and West Germans compete on one team. The situation became tenuous when the Berlin Wall was constructed in 1962 and Western nations began refusing visas to East German athletes. The uneasy compromise of a unified team held until the 1968 Grenoble Games, when the IOC officially split the teams and threatened to reject the host city bids of any country that refused entry visas to East German athletes. Boycott. The Winter Games have had only one national team boycott when Taiwan decided not to participate in the 1980 Winter Olympics held in Lake Placid. Prior to the Games the IOC agreed to allow China to compete in the Olympics for the first time since 1952. China was given permission to compete as the People's Republic of China, and to use the PRC flag and anthem. Until 1980 the island of Taiwan had been competing under the name Republic of China, and had been using the ROC flag and anthem. The IOC attempted to have the countries compete together, but when this proved to be unacceptable the IOC demanded that Taiwan cease to call itself the Republic of China. The IOC renamed the island Chinese Taipei, and demanded that it adopt a different flag and national anthem. Stipulations that Taiwan would not agree to. Despite numerous appeals and court hearings the IOC's decision stood. When the Taiwanese athletes arrived at the Olympic Village with their Republic of China identification cards they were not admitted. They subsequently left the Olympics in protest, just before the opening ceremonies. Taiwan returned to Olympic competition at the 1984 Winter Games in Sarajevo as Chinese Taipei. The country agreed to compete under a flag bearing the emblem of their National Olympic Committee and to play the anthem of their National Olympic Committee should one of their athletes win a gold medal. The agreement remains in place to this day. Sports, Chapter 1, Article 6 of the 2007 edition of the Olympic Charter defines winter sports as sports which are practiced on snow or ice. Since 1992 a number of new sports have been added to the Olympic program, which include short track speed skating, snowboarding, freestyle and mogul skiing. The addition of these events has broadened the appeal of the Winter Olympics beyond Europe and North America. While European powers such as Norway and Germany still dominate the traditional Winter Olympic sports, countries such as South Korea, Australia and Canada are finding success in the new sports. The results are more parity in the national medal tables, more interest in the Winter Olympics and higher global television ratings. Current sport disciplines, Note 1. Figure skating events were held at the 1908 and 1920 Summer Olympics. Note 2. A men's ice hockey tournament was held at the 1920 Summer Olympics. Note 3. The IOC's website now treats men's military patrol at the 1924 Games as an event within the sport of biathlon. Demonstration events. Demonstration sports have historically provided a venue for host countries to attract publicity to locally popular sports by having a competition without granting medals. Demonstration sports were discontinued after 1992. Military patrol, a precursor to the biathlon, was a medal sport in 1924 and was demonstrated in 1928, 1936 and 1948, becoming an official sport in 1960. The special figures figure skating event was only contested at the 1908 Summer Olympics. Bandy is a sport popular in the Nordic countries and Russia. In the latter it's considered a national sport. It was demonstrated at the Oslo Games. Ice stock sport, a German variant of curling, was demonstrated in 1936 in Germany and 1964 in Austria. The ski ballet event, later known as ski acro, was demonstrated in 1988 and 1992. Skiger paragraph ring, skiing behind dogs, was a demonstration sport in St. Moritz in 1928. A sled dog race was held at Lake Placid in 1932. Speed skiing was demonstrated in Albertville at the 1992 Winter Olympics. Winter pentathlon, a variant of the modern pentathlon, was included as a demonstration event at the 1948 Games in Switzerland. It was composed of cross-country skiing, shooting, downhill skiing, fencing and horse riding. List of Winter Olympic Games. Unlike the Summer Olympics, the cancelled 1940 Winter Olympics and 1944 Winter Olympics are not included in the official Roman numeral counts for the Winter Games. While the official titles of the Summer Games count Olympiads, the titles of the Winter Games only count the Games themselves. See also, Notes. References. Bibliography. External links, Olympic Winter Sports IOC official website, Winter Olympic Games venues on Google Maps.